It started with a click. Not a loud one. Just the soft mechanical sigh of a phone call ending. But the silence that followed it, that was the sound that stayed with me. That and her voice still echoing down the hallway in my mind. We'll put him in a home and sell the place while he's gone. He won't even know. I was supposed to be asleep. They'd thought I was resting in the den, the door cracked just enough to let in the hum of the hallway light. But I'd come back for my glasses, forgotten on the kitchen table. That's when I heard it, my daughter's voice, low and hurried, slicing through the quiet. "We can't keep doing this," she'd whispered to someone, probably her husband. "Your dad's fine, but it's time. He's just sitting on that property. 890, maybe more. If we wait too long, the market has." Her voice dropped further. I heard the words nursing home and power of attorney, and I stood there frozen, my fingers still brushing the rim of my coffee mug. I didn't breathe. Not until she ended the call, not until she passed me in the hallway and smiled like nothing had changed. But everything had. That night I laid in bed with my hands clasped over my stomach like I was already being measured for a box. I didn't cry. That part of me is long done. I just stared at the ceiling and replayed what I'd heard. Over and over. Not shocked, just disappointed in how unsurprised I was. See, this wasn't the first time I'd been treated like a task to be managed. A dot on someone's to-do list. But it was the first time I realized I might be erased entirely. And while they talked about me like I was some fragile vase too old to move, they didn't know the vase had already been moved years ago. Back when she'd asked me to add her name to the deed. "Just in case something happens to you," she'd said with a soft smile and a nervous laugh. "It's not about money, Dad. I just want to make sure you're protected." Protected. That word settled on me now like a lie wrapped in gift paper. I had believed her too. I had trusted the girl who used to cry into my collar after softball games, who held my hand when her mother died. The same girl who asked me to co-sign her student loans and forgot to send a birthday card 3 years in a row. That next morning I went through the usual motions: coffee, newspaper, the same flannel robe I've worn since '98, but I also pulled out a file from the drawer beneath the telephone, one I hadn't touched in years. My lawyer's number was still on the inside cover, just in case something happens, and now something had. They sent me away a week later. A surprise trip, they called it. "You need a break, Dad, just relax, we've got everything handled." Her husband helped carry my suitcase to the shuttle. She kissed my cheek, a little too brightly. "You don't worry about a thing." I didn't. Not even when I returned 2 weeks later, bags in hand, only to find the key wouldn't turn. That's the moment that'll stick with them. Not the phone call I wasn't supposed to hear. Not the papers they rushed through while I was away. No, it'll be that moment when their smiles dropped as they tried to fit a key into a lock that no longer welcomed them. Because I'd already been here. I'd already seen the for sale sign go up online. Already watched the transaction history through a friend at the county office. I knew exactly how much they got: $890,000. Fast, tidy, no inspection. They thought I'd never notice. They thought I'd be gone by the time the ink dried. But I was already 2 steps ahead. I left them a note. Folded cleanly, taped to the door they once used to run through barefoot in the summer. Just a few lines, handwritten in the careful penmanship they hadn't seen since I wrote letters to their camp counselors. "I heard everything. The house is no longer yours to unlock. The keys you carry don't fit here, and neither do your excuses." I didn't wait to see their faces. But the neighbors did. Behind half-drawn curtains, over manicured lawns, whispers began. The old man who used to wave from the porch, he was so senile after all. I never answered her calls. 22 in one evening. Voicemails, texts, even an email with the subject line, "Please, Dad." But I didn't respond. I didn't need to. She'd made her choices. And I'd made mine. I moved into a small apartment by the water. Just me, a percolator, and the sound of the waves. No visitors. No questions. I paid in full with cash. The same cash they didn't know I tucked away long before she ever said the words "just in case." I sat on the balcony this morning with my coffee and no phone nearby. The ocean was quiet, steady, honest. Unlike the promises my daughter made. They sold the house. But they lost the man who built it. It was a Tuesday, late spring, when it happened. Not the big betrayal, not yet, just a small scene in the kitchen. One of those moments so quiet you almost miss it. Almost. The sun had just come through the east windows, streaking gold across the linoleum. I'd opened the back door to let in the morning air while I diced carrots for the stew. My daughter, Melanie, stood at the counter beside me, flipping through the mail, her phone propped up beside the coffee pot, a podcast murmuring about real estate trends. You used to make that with barley, she said absently, not looking up. I still do, I said, dropping the carrots into the pot. But the doctor said to go easy on it with the sodium content, so I switched to lentils. She replied. Not agreement, not disapproval, just that vague sound people make when they've stopped listening. I stirred the pot and smiled, pretending it didn't matter. Then the mail caught her attention. She held up an envelope with my name on it, a pale green windowed thing, and asked, Do you want me to handle this one for you, Dad? It's from the insurance. I dried my hands and took it gently from her. No, thank you. I've got it. She didn't say anything right away, just watched me a bit too long. Then she folded her arms and said lightly, You know, it's probably time we simplify things for you. You've got a lot on your plate, this house, the bills. It might be easier to let me take over the paperwork, just the boring stuff. My heart didn't lurch. It didn't even flinch. It just settled, heavier than before. She wasn't being unkind. That's what made it sting. Her voice was soft, her smile faint. She said it like someone offering to carry a heavy box you didn't ask for help with. Like she already assumed I'd struggle to manage it on my own. I opened the envelope slowly. I still like to see things with my own eyes, I said. She laughed gently, as if I'd said something quaint. Of course, Dad, I didn't mean anything by it. But she did. Or maybe she didn't. Maybe that was the point. Maybe dismissals don't always arrive with sharp words or raised voices. Sometimes they slip enwrapped in kindness and convenience. She left soon after, rushing out with her coffee in a stainless steel cup and a distracted kiss on my cheek. We'll talk more later, okay? Don't forget your walk today. My walk. Like I was on a schedule designed by someone else. Like movement was the only proof I hadn't stopped existing. After she left, I stood alone in the kitchen. The pot on the stove bubbled softly. Outside, a jaybird chirped from the fence opposed, bold and blue and disturbed. I thought of my wife then. Rose would have said something if she'd heard that tone. She'd have set her tea down and told our daughter plainly, Your father isn't made of dust. But Rose had been gone 6 years, and I'd learned to keep the peace. Especially when peace felt like all I had left of her. I sat at the table and unfolded the insurance letter. It was routine, just a yearly statement, but I read every line, not because I didn't understand it, but because I needed to remind myself I still could. Later that day, Melanie sent a group text, thinking about getting Dad set up with auto-pay and maybe simplifying the accounts a bit less stress for everyone. She included her husband and my granddaughter in the message, as if I wasn't sitting in the same house, reading it on the same thread. I didn't reply. The next morning the mail came early. I stood at the curb holding a handful of flyers and bills and something else, something that made my throat tighten, a catalogue for senior living communities. It had my name on the label. Not resident, not household. My full name. In print. I turned it over. Inside, photographs of cheerful grey-haired folks playing bridge, walking tidy garden paths. Smiling. Safe. Managed. I stared at it for a long time, then dropped it into the recycling bin without breaking stride. Melanie called that evening, cheerful again. Did you see that brochure that came today? Just something I sent off for no pressure, of course. Some of those places are really nice. I wanted to ask her, why now? Why start talking about those places when the rose bush I planted for her mother was still blooming just outside the window? When I still drove to the grocery store, still read the paper front to back, still paid every bill on time. But I didn't ask. I just said, yes, I saw it. There was a pause on the line. Then she said, okay, well, just something to think about. Love you, Dad. And she hung up. That night I couldn't sleep. I stood by the kitchen window in my slippers, looking out at the dark lawn, the solar lights casting faint halos on the grass. My hands were cold. I reached for the heating knob but didn't turn it. I just stood there. It's strange, the things you remember when someone starts talking like you're already gone. Like the time Melanie begged me to let her keep a stray cat in high school. For the morning she brought me a misshapen pancake and said it was a tired because it was Father's Day. That girl would never have talked about placing me in a home. But she was gone, replaced by a woman with spreadsheets and savings goals and 1,000 rational reasons for every inch of distance. And me? I was still here, still paying attention, still waking up every morning in the house I built with Rose, where we painted the shutters green and hung wind chimes from the porch just because we liked the sound. So I made a quiet decision. I wouldn't stop them from doing what they were already planning. I'd just make sure they didn't realize I was planning to. It was the little things that went missing first. Not possessions. Not anything I could point to on a shelf and say, that used to be mine. No, it was subtler than that, like the seat I used to claim at the dinner table, now filled without pause by someone younger, someone louder, someone whose opinions carried more weight than my presence. The meals changed before I did. We used to sit down together at 6 o'clock. That was the rhythm of this house. Melanie grew up on it: meatloaf on Mondays, spaghetti on Thursdays, Sunday roast with mashed potatoes that always needed more butter than anyone admitted. But now dinner was whenever they were done with their day. A rush bite before a Zoom call. A smoothie bowl on the couch. Leftovers with earbuds in. One evening I came into the kitchen to find the dining table half cleared, crumbs still scattered across the placemats, 2 empty wine glasses beside a bottle of rose with a twist cap. They'd eaten already, Melanie and her husband. I hadn't noticed the time. The sun had gone down behind the willow tree, and my stomach had been my only clock. "Oh, Dad," she said, glancing over her shoulder. "We figured you were resting. There's some chicken in the fridge." I nodded. "Thanks." She didn't ask if I wanted company. Didn't pull out a chair or pour a glass. Just went back to her screen, talking softly into her headset about quarterly numbers and deadlines. I ate standing up at night. Cold chicken, no sauce. The kind of meal you take quietly from the back shelf when you don't want to inconvenience anyone. Later, I heard laughter from the living room, her husband watching something with their daughter, both of them chuckling while I rinsed my plate and set it to dry beside the sink. I had become background noise in my own house. In the mornings, I still made coffee. 2 scoops. 1 filter, the same percolator I'd had since Rose bought it at the yard sale in '92. But even that ritual became muted. "Dad, we're trying to cut back on caffeine," Melanie said one morning, waving vaguely toward my cup as if it offended the air. "Maybe just use the single-serve machine." I smiled. "I've used this one for 30 years. Feels like it knows me." She laughed, not unkindly. "It's just the smell sticks in the curtains." That afternoon, I found my percolator moved to the garage shelf tucked between the lawn clippers and an old fan. No one said anything about it. Like it had never belonged. I started noticing other things. My armchair, the one with the faded blue cushion and the groove just where my shoulder liked to rest, moved to the sunroom for space. My slippers, once left by the hearth, now stored neatly in the closet upstairs. And the mail. That stopped coming to my name altogether. Everything was addressed to Melanie now. Utility bills. Bank statements. Even the church bulletin I used to read on Wednesdays. She hadn't asked if she could change the address. It just arrived one day in her name, and she read it alone, only passing it to me when I asked. "You're not going anymore anyway," she'd said when I mentioned the change. That was true. I hadn't gone in a while. But it wasn't about the bulletin. It was about remembering I was still part of something, still looped into the world in more ways than just the labels on my pill bottles. The grandkids start saying goodnight, too. It used to be they'd pop in before bed, quick hugs, giggles, a flash of teeth in the hallway light. Now it was just the sound of doors shutting down the hallway, the patter of socks on hardwood, and silence. I became a hallway light left on. Useful, but unnoticed. One night, I heard them talking from the living room. I hadn't meant to listen. I was heading to the laundry room for a clean towel, but I paused when I heard my name. "I just don't want to have to worry," Melanie was saying. "What if something happens and we're not prepared? It's too much house for him, and you know it." Her husband murmured something I didn't catch. "We can't just wait," she said. "He's fine now, but it's all going to fall on us eventually. We should have listed the place already." I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Eventually, I backed down the hallway like a ghost who'd heard too much. I didn't confront her. What would I say? That I heard my own obsolescence being planned like a budget? That night, I slept poorly. Not because of the words, but because I realized how unsurprised I was to hear them. The next day, I started packing a box. Not for moving, just for me. A quiet act of preservation. I filled it with the letters Rose had written me from the hospital in '87, the cufflinks I wore to Melanie's wedding, the photo of our dog Pepper with her tongue out in the snow, things that wouldn't matter to anyone else, things that proved I had been here at lunch. Melanie made a salad. She didn't offer me one. I asked, and she blinked, surprised. "Oh, I just figured you don't eat kale." I smiled. "I do if it comes with cretins." She laughed and made me a plate. But I could feel it, the hesitance, the weight of having to remember me. The way kindness turned from instinct into obligation. The following week she installed a camera in the hallway. Just in case, she said when I asked. Of what? I asked. She didn't answer. And I didn't push. Somewhere in those days between the camera blinking in the dark and the mail changing names, I realized I'd become invisible. Not hated. Not mistreated. Just pass over. Like an old painting taken down to make space for something brighter, trendier, easier to explain. But I was still in the room. I was still looking. And I was still capable. They hadn't taken that from me yet. It wasn't a grand day, the kind you put in a photo album or mark on the calendar. It was a Sunday in late October, the kind that smells like wood smoke and windfall apples. The kind where everything feels slow and tender. Melanie was 10. I remember because she'd just lost her second front tooth and kept poking at the gap with her tongue like she couldn't believe it belonged to her. Rose was baking. She used to bake when the air turned. Apple crisp, pumpkin bread, cinnamon rolls that filled the house so thick with sugar and butter it made the wallpaper feel warmer. That day it was a peach cobbler canned peaches, mind you, because we'd run out of fresh, but she made it work. She always did. The house was full of sound back then. Melanie's footsteps thumping down the stairs, her bare heels slapping the linoleum. Rose humming while she moved from counter to oven, brushing her hair back with a flour-dusted wrist. And me at the table, newspaper folded, pen in hand, half reading and half listening. "Daddy," Melanie said, sliding onto the bench across from me. "You know what I want to be when I grow up?" "What's that?" I asked, pretending to scan the sports section. "A pie maker." I raised an eyebrow. "Not a doctor, not an astronaut?" "Nope," she said, popping the pea. "I'm gonna make pies and give 'em to people who are sad, because nobody can cry with a pie in their mouth." Rose laughed then. That soft, crinkled laugh that started in her throat and ended in her eyes. She turned to me, wooden spoon in hand, and said, "She gets that from you, you know." "Get what?" I asked. "The belief that you can fix the world with a warm plate and a kind word." I looked at Melanie. Her chin was smudged with jam. She was smiling, gap-toothed, bright-eyed, fearless. And I remember thinking, this is the best it'll ever be. That was the same year we built the deck out back. The same year Rose found the antique key at the flea market and hung it above the kitchen doorway for luck. We didn't lock the front door most nights back then. Didn't need to. The house held us like a cupped hand. Even now I can still feel the ridges of that moment. The way the sunlight hit the tiles. The hum of the old refrigerator. The smell of vanilla and burnt sugar wafting through the hallway. Melanie leaned over and reached for the crossword, pointing at a half-filled square. "The answer's ember," she said confidently. "Like in the fire." I checked. She was right. I tore that section out and folded it into her lunchbox the next morning. Wrote a thanks for the help pie maker. She kept it for years. Taped it to her closet door with that neon pink tape that never really sticks. I don't know if she remembers that now. I doubt it. But I do. I remember every inch of those years. Every scraped neon glitter glued birthday card. Every whispered "I'm scared" when thunder shook the windows, and every laugh that spilled into the hallway after bedtime. I remember what it felt like to be the one she turned to, not because I was convenient, but because I was home. Back then, the house was loud. Not with chaos, but with life. The radiator knocking like an old man clearing his throat. The pipes singing their rusty tune when the shower ran too long. Even the floorboards had their voice creaking under my steps, groaning with age but never silence. Now the house is quiet. Too quiet. The floorboards still creak, but no one listens. The radiator still coughs in the winter, but no one checks the valve. And Melanie? She walks through the rooms like she's measuring square footage, not memories. Sometimes I wonder if she hears it through that hollowness that echoes behind every polite word. The way she speaks to me like a customer service rep, friendly, efficient, distant. It's not cruel. That would be easier. It's just indifferent. And indifference is colder than anger. At least anger means you still matter enough to upset someone. Last week, I stood in a kitchen, same tile, same view of the willow tree, and reached for a mug. The blue one with the little chip in the handle. My mug. Only it wasn't there. Replaced by a row of matching white ceramic cups with gold rims. I donated the old ones, Melanie said when I asked. Figured we could declutter. Declutter. Like the mug I held every morning for 20 years was just debris. I didn't argue. Didn't sigh. Just opened the garage and found it sitting in the donation box, nestled between Rosa's cookbooks and a stack of DVD we no longer watch. I took it out quietly and put it back on the shelf. It didn't match the new ones. It didn't need to. It matched me. That night I sat in the sunroom with my tea and the crossword. 7 across a glowing remnant of fire. Ember. Still there. Still burning. It was a Tuesday again. Funny how these little betrayals always seem to land on the quiet days, the ones without birthdays or holidays, the ones that feel safe enough to let your guard down. I was standing by the window, the morning light catching the edge of my coffee cup, when the phone rang. Not the usual ringtone either. This one was different, sharper, brighter. A chime Melanie had assigned to her own calls, though I hadn't heard it in weeks. I wiped my hands on the dish towel and answered. "Hello?" "Hi, Dad," she said, breathless. "I'm just leaving the store. Thought I'd stop by in a bit." My hand froze in midair. "Oh," I said too quickly. "Sure, everything all right?" Yeah. She laughed, like she hadn't noticed the weeks of silence. "I just realized I hadn't seen you in a while. I picked up something you might like." She hung up before I could ask what. I stood there for a moment longer, blinking at the phone like it might explain itself. Something I might like. Not something I needed. Not a request for a signature or a form or the Wi-Fi password. Just something for me. The knot in my chest that had become a quiet companion eased slightly. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe the wind had shifted in my favor. So I changed shirts. It seemed a small thing, but it wasn't. I swapped out the soft grey flannel I'd worn 2 days running for the navy button-down I kept in the closet for company. Brushed my hair. Dabbed the faintest bit of aftershave under my collar, not because I expected anything, but because, somewhere deep down, the boy in me still wanted to be seen. I even made tea. Set 2 cups out. And when her car pulled up the drive, I stood at the window like a child waiting for a parade. She came in with a reusable shopping bag, the kind made from thick canvas and printed with lemons. Smiled, kissed my cheek, and said, "I didn't stay long, just needed to clear my head." She placed the bag on the counter. From it she pulled a new robe plate, soft, the kind you see folded neatly in catalogues with men twice my age smiling blankly above the caption, "Perfect for Dad." It still had the price tag tucked inside. "I thought you might want something cozier. Yours looks a little worn." I looked at it, then at her. "It's nice," I said, holding the fabric gently. "Very warm." She nodded, pleased with herself. Then poured herself some tea from the pot I'd made. We sat at the table like people playing house, talking about neutral things, weather, traffic, the neighbor's new dog that barked at shadows. Nothing real. Nothing deep. But she was there. And for a few moments I let myself believe this was the start of something again. Not a full repair. Just a soft turning back toward each other. A robe. A visit. A sign. When she stood to leave, I walked her to the door. "Thanks for coming by," I said. She turned, smiled faintly, and squeezed my hand. "Of course, you're still my dad." Still. That word lingered longer than it should have. But I didn't let it settle. Not then. After she drove off, I sat down and held the robe again. Rubbed the sleeve between my fingers. It was warm. It was soft. It smelled faintly of whatever store she'd pulled it from, something lemony and clean. Not like me. But maybe that was the point. I folded it neatly and set it on the arm of the couch. I didn't wear it that day, but I thought about it. Thought about leaving it out when she next visited. Letting her see it. Letting her believe I'd embraced the gesture fully. That night I even felt lighter. I reheated the stew from Sunday and poured a small glass of wine. Thought maybe I'd call her next week. Ask if she'd like to go to the park with me. Something small. Just a walk. Just to talk. I slept with the window cracked open, letting the spring air whisper across the curtains. And for the first time in months, I woke before the alarm and made the bed with careful corners. The robe still sat folded in the living room, but I didn't put it on. Not yet. The next day, I found the envelope on the kitchen table. I don't know how I missed it. Maybe she'd left it without a word. Maybe she hadn't meant for me to find it until later. But there it was, white thick, with my name written in her handwriting. No greeting, no little heart above the eye like she used to add when she was younger. Just that. Inside, a printout. A confirmation. Sale agreement in 97 Windmere Drive. My house. Signed. Dated. The closing scheduled for next week. I sat down slowly, the chair creaking beneath me like it knew what I'd seen. The document was crisp, clean. Legal language so precise it felt surgical. Every detail accounted for. Every column neat. Except one small note at the bottom, added in pen, not type. You'll be so much happier once we move you into somewhere safe. Somewhere safe. The robe. The tea. The smile. It had all been a lullaby. Not a new beginning. Just a soft goodbye. I sat there until the light changed in the kitchen. Watched the shadow of the curtain shift from one side of the floor to the other as if measuring my stillness. I didn't cry. I didn't pace. I just sat. Because I had known. Somewhere deep in the marrow of me, I had known this kindness wasn't return, it was preparation. A small spoonful of sugar before the medicine. A quiet comfort before the door clicked shut. That night I finally wore the robe. Not because I wanted to, but because I needed to feel how it fit. Because I knew the next time she came she'd want to see it on me. And I wanted to remember what it felt like to wear something gifted in good faith just once before I turned it into armor. There comes a point, not all at once, but slowly, like dusk easing over the sky, when you stop expecting to be remembered. Not resented. Not even disliked. Just no longer considered. It's not one moment. It's dozens of them. The unanswered texts. The way your name drops out of family plans like a typo no one bothers to fix. The holidays they simplified without you. The mail that stops being addressed to you. And then, of course, the house. Your house. Sold. I sat in the backyard the day before they left. A folding chair, a chipped mug of cold tea, and the last warm patch of sun before the clouds rolled in. I could hear birds calling out in the maple tree, high and sharp. A sound that had always made this house feel alive. Now it just reminded me how much time had passed. The garden was still there, though smaller. I hadn't kept up with the pruning this year. My knees ached too much. But the roses still bloomed, stubborn and tangled. Melanie never liked the roses. Said they were too much work. She preferred plant as tidy, uniform, replaceable. Like me, I suppose. That morning I'd stood in the middle of the kitchen and tried to remember what it had once looked like. Not the tile or the cabinets, but the life. The mess. The mismatched chairs and the open cookbooks, the damp socks draped over the vent in winter. The dogs we'd let sleep inside during storms. The noise. Now the house was echo and order. Everything boxed. Labelled. Stacked in the garage like I'd already died and they were doing me the favor of sorting my leftovers. I hadn't asked where they were going. I already knew. A business trip, they said. 3 days. Just long enough to sign the papers and come back with wide smiles and new plans. They'd left with laughter in their throats and shopping bags in their hands. Melanie kissed my forehead like she was visiting a patient, and said, "We'll be back before you miss us." But I'd stopped missing people a long time ago. Now I just watched them leave. And when the car pulled out of the drive, I stood on the porch with one hand in the pocket of my sweater, the other curled around the house key. The old one. Brass, worn smooth. It didn't matter anymore. They'd changed the locks. They hadn't said it outright, but I knew. The paperwork made that clear. I'd become a line item. Something to be relocated. Managed. Somewhere safe, she'd written. As if this place had ever been dangerous. I'd built this house with Rose. Not with nails and beams, though I'd fixed more than my share of squeaky doors and warped floorboards, but with time. With sweat and savings and compromises made in late-night whispers. This was where she danced barefoot in a hallway, where Melanie took her first steps, where the world had always been just close enough to reach, but never close enough to drown us. And now it was sold. Done. I was still in it, yes. For one more night. But the walls no longer felt mine. The light switches, the smell of the garage, the creak and the second step, they all knew. They all held their breath like I was already a guest. I didn't sleep that night. Just sat in the front room, the one no one used anymore. The one with the good armchair and the quiet view of the street. It was past midnight when I realized I hadn't eaten. Not forgotten, just didn't see the point. Food tastes different when you're not expected. I remember thinking, this is what fading feels like. Not dying. No. Death is loud. It has rituals, casseroles, cards. This is quieter. It's living in the negative space of your own story. Being the comma, not the sentence. I stood up sometime around 3 a.m., walked through the house one last time. Not a tour. Just a ritual. I touched the pantry door, still scarred from when Melanie slammed it during her first teenage tantrum. The corner of the fireplace, where Rose chipped the brick moving a chair. The window by the sink that caught the morning sun just right, back when breakfasts were loud. These were my fingerprints. My ghosts. And I felt them slipping through me like steam. By 5 a.m., the sky had started to lighten. I stepped outside barefoot and stood on the porch. The world looked the same, but I didn't. I felt like a sweater stretched thin in the elbows, folded wrong one too many times. Still warm, still useful, but quietly worn out. I closed my eyes and let the morning sit on my face. And for the first time in years, I allowed myself to think, maybe they're right. Maybe I'm too much ours. Too many memories. Too many stories that no one wants to hear again. Maybe it's time. Maybe I should let go. But as the wind shifted and the old wind chimes clattered against the eaves, I remembered something Rose once said on a day when bills were tight and the roof leaked and we argued over whether to fix a car or buy new shoes for Melanie. She said, "Don't confuse being tired with being done." And in that moment, standing barefoot on a porch of a house no longer mine, I realized I was tired. But I wasn't done. Not yet. The envelope was still on the counter when I woke. I hadn't moved it. Hadn't touched it. It sat there like an unwanted guest, angled just enough to catch the morning light through the kitchen window. The sun hit the corner where Melanie had written her note in pen. "You'll be happier once we move you somewhere safe." That word again. Safe. Wrapped in concern, but hollow underneath. Like those pre-cut fruit trays they sell at the store, tidy, efficient, and stripped of everything that once made them sweet. I stood by the sink with the water running over my fingertips, not hot, not cold, just enough to remind me I still felt something. My reflection in the window showed a man in a robe someone else picked out, in a house someone else now owned. And still I hadn't left. Wasn't asked to yet. That part, I'm sure, would come soon enough. But the air in the house had already changed. Everything felt temporary. Even me. I sat at the table, poured myself a cup of coffee instant, too bitter, and looked out the window like I had every morning for the last 20 years. Same willow tree, same empty sidewalk, same pale porch across the street where Mrs. Leary once sat in her bathrobe and waved through her last spring. But today I didn't wave. I didn't even lift my hand. Because something in me had gone still. Not defeated. Not numb. Just measured. I thought of Melanie's face when she'd handed me that robe. Taut. Careful. Like someone packaging a breakable thing they no longer wanted but didn't want to shatter either. They think I don't see it. They think I'm grateful. They think I'm finished. I'm not. That thought came without force, without flourish. It just arrived and made itself at home, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I reached into the drawer where I used to keep Rose's recipe cards. Most were gone now, packed or discarded. But tucked near the back was an old folder, navy blue, frayed at the edges. Inside, a copy of the original deed. The one with both our names. Rose and me. I ran my thumb over the date. June 1979. Bought for $48,000. A lifetime ago. Next to it, another slip smaller stapled. Melanie's name. The addition made 6 years ago, for convenience. That word again. They'd added her, but they hadn't erased me. Not yet. I closed the folder and slid it under the placemat. My hand trembled slightly, not from age, not from fear, but from something else. Something I hadn't felt in years. Resolve. It didn't look like anger. Didn't even look like sadness. It looked like stillness. Like that moment right before the storm hits, when everything is too quiet and the wind forgets which direction to blow. I didn't call my lawyer. Not yet. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't confront anyone. But I did open the drawer beside the fridge. The one where I kept old warranties, dog tags from pets long gone, and a business card yellowed now with a number I hadn't dialed in a decade. Harold Santon, Esquire. Estate law. Real property. The man who helped Rose and me draft our first will when Melanie was still learning cursive. He had shaky handwriting, smelled faintly of mint, and always carried 2 pens in his breast pocket like he was waiting for a trick question. I placed the card on the table and set my coffee beside it. The decision wasn't made yet. But something had shifted. And once that shift happens, even the walls start listening differently. That afternoon, Melanie called. She said, "We're finalizing a few things with the agent today. Just signatures and keys. We'll be home late." I said nothing for a long moment. Then quietly, "Take your time." She laughed. "Everything okay?" I looked around the kitchen. At the hooks where Rose used to hang her aprons. At the crack in the windowsill where Melanie once carved her initials with a hairpin. at the ghost of our old life still living in the corners. "It will be," I said. That evening I took a walk. Not far. Just to the corner where the oak tree splits the sidewalk. The air was cool, the kind of cool that brushes your cheeks without asking for permission. I let it settle into my bones. On the way back, I paused in front of the house. From the sidewalk, it looked just like it always had, the brick softened by age, porch light still flickering from a loose wire I never quite fixed. To a stranger, it would look like home. To me, it looked like memory. And memory, I've learned, is stronger than deed or title. When I stepped back inside, the floor creaked under my heel. Not in protest. In recognition. I belonged here. And maybe, just maybe, it was time I reminded them of that. The next morning, I rose before the sun. Not because I couldn't sleep, though that's often true, but because I had somewhere to be. A decision had formed overnight. Not loud, not urgent. Just solid. Like a stone settled in water. I shaved. Not quickly, not out of habit, but with care. The way I used to before anniversary dinners, before interviews, before I felt the need to remind myself that I was still a man worth presenting. The robe stayed folded on the chair. Instead, I wore slacks. A button down. The one with the faint blue checkered pattern. Nothing special, just enough to feel like I hadn't been forgotten even by myself. I made coffee with the percolator they'd stashed in the garage weeks ago. Cleaned it. Polished the steel. Let it hum to life the way it used to. The smell filled the kitchen, warm and grounded, wrapping around me like memory done right. Then I pulled out the envelope. Not the sale papers. The card. The business card. Harold Santon. I didn't call. I didn't need to. Not yet. Instead, I slid it into my wallet and tucked a small manila folder under my arm, the one with the deed copy, the closed Melanie never bothered to read. The one Rose and I added all those years ago, upon dissolution of joint tenancy without express consent, title reverts. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. Not of the house, but of myself. At 8:45 I stepped out into the morning, locked the front door, and walked to the bus stop. It had been years since I had taken the 47 line, but the rhythm came back easily. The driver nodded as I boarded, didn't ask questions. I took a window seat near the back and let the city unfold around me. At the beachside district I got off. People walked briskly, holding lattes, wearing earphones. I didn't hurry. I took each step deliberately, soaking in the salt and sky. Then I turned down a quiet street where the buildings leaned low and kind. There, tucked between a bookstore and a florist, stood the rental office. The bell chimed as I stepped inside. "Can I help you?" the woman behind the desk asked, looking up from her screen. I nodded. "I'd like to see one of the one-bedroom units facing the water." She smiled politely. "Are you relocating?" I considered the word. "No," I said. "I'm reclaiming." It wasn't grand. It wasn't dramatic. Just a modest apartment with white curtains and a window seat that faced the ocean. The carpet was clean, the light warm. No stairs. No noise. Peace. That's all I wanted. When she handed me the forms, I signed without hesitation. Month to month. Paid 3 in advance with the cash I tucked away for just such a day. She handed me the keys. Real ones. Not fobs or codes or apps. Metal keys that felt solid in the hand. "You'll get a mailbox number by the end of the week," she said. "Welcome home." I didn't correct her. I walked down to the beach before heading back. Sat on the bench with the wind at my back and watched the waves fold over each other, steady and unapologetic. That afternoon I returned to the house. Let myself in. And packed one small bag. I didn't need much. Just a few clothes. My books. The blue mug they tried to donate. The photo of Rose and me at the lake, both of us sunburned and laughing, years before cancer dared to touch her. I left the rest. They could have the furniture, the framed diplomas, the matching dishware they insisted we needed. I didn't want them any more. I wanted space. My space. Before I left, I wrote a note. Not long. Just enough to say what needed saying. "Melanie, you made your decision. So did I. The house is no longer your concern. I won't be here when you return. Don't call. Dad." I taped it to the inside of the pantry door. The same door she slammed when she was 16. The one that still carried her anger in its hinges. And then I locked the front door with the old brass key. I didn't leave it behind. I took it with me. Not because it opened anything anymore, but because it once did. The house was still when I left it. Not empty, just still. Like it understood what was happening and had chosen to bow out gracefully. I walked through one last time, not as someone being pushed out, but as someone taking their leave on their own terms. I didn't say goodbye loud. That house had already heard too many things that were never said with kindness. Instead, I moved slowly from room to room, touching what mattered, ignoring what didn't. In a hallway closet, I pulled out an old quilt, blue and frayed, the one rose-stitched the year Melanie broke her arm and spent 6 weeks on the couch watching cartoons. The corners were worn thin, but it still held warmth. I folded it neatly and laid it across the back of the chair in the front room. Not for them. For memory. In the kitchen, I opened the silverware drawer and removed one spoon. Just one. Not because I needed it, but because it was mine. Rose had bought it at a church sale, years ago. The handle slightly bent, the edges dulled from decades of stirring. It was the only piece they hadn't replaced with a matching set. I slipped it into my pocket. I looked once more at the photo Melanie had hung above the mantel last year. A wide angle of the whole family at a pumpkin patch smiling, arms linked, but even then I'd been standing off to the side, half caught by the frame. I hadn't noticed it at the time, but now it seemed fitting. I didn't take it down. Let them look at it and remember how much space they'd made by pushing me just out of view. Then I walked to the front door, locked it behind me with the old brass key, and tucked that key into a plain white envelope. No note. Just a key. I drove to Melanie's house, not the one she grew up in, but the one with the automatic garage and the motion lights and the box hedges that looked like they'd been designed by someone who hated nature. I walked up the path and left the envelope on the mat. That was it. No knock. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a key. A quiet reply to everything they hadn't said and everything they had. Then I turned and left. Back to my new place, where the ocean greeted me not with demands, but with rhythm. Where no one asked me what time I'd be home, or if I'd remembered to take my pills. Where I didn't need to justify my space or explain my silence. Just a man, with a spoon in his drawer, a blue quilt folded at the foot of his bed, and a new set of keys that only he carried. That night, I opened the window and let the breeze curl around the room. I made tea. Used the percolator. Stirred it with the spoon Rose had loved. Sat in a chair that didn't creak under the weight of memory. And I didn't wait. Not for a knock, or a call, or an apology. I simply existed. And claimed. And finally free. It's strange the way silence can heal. Not the silence of being ignored, that's a hollow kind. But the kind you choose. The kind you build like a small, sturdy shelter after too many seasons of rain. My apartment faces the water. Not directly, the view is just slightly off to the left, but if you sit in the window seat and lean just a bit, you can watch the waves roll in and back again and again, like the world is remembering itself. I sit there most mornings now. Cup of tea in hand. No phone. No emails. No interruptions. Just the sound of wind through the railing and the soft, rhythmic hush of the tide. When Melanie called, because of course she did, eventually I didn't answer. Not out of spite. Just because there was nothing left to say. She called 22 times. Left voicemails that started frantic and softened with each message, like she was peeling off layers of pride, searching for the right one to wear. But I didn't press play. I didn't need to. I already knew the script. We didn't mean to hurt you. It was for your own good. You should have told us how you felt. But I had. In every quiet dinner eaten alone. In every skipped invitation. In every mail-forwarded flyer for senior housing. In every key they replaced without asking. They hadn't listened. They planned around me like I was a variable they no longer wanted to factor into the equation. So I'd taken myself out of it. Now, my name is on a new lease. I make my own meals, light on salt, just how I like them. I read the paper cover to cover. I go for walks without reporting back. I listen to classical music in the evening, soft, cello-heavy pieces that Rose used to play when the world got too loud. And for the first time in a long while, I am not being managed. I am simply being. There's a small coffee shop down the block. The barista knows my name. She calls me Mr. Wren, though I've asked her 3 times to just say Daniel. I tip anyway. She puts extra foam on my cappuccino and tells me about her dog. I nod, and I listen, and I don't feel old. I just feel present. Sometimes I bring my notebook. Not to write anything grand, just thoughts. Observations. Sentences that come to me like old friends at a train station. I write down what the sea smells like on Mondays. What kind of bird visited the balcony yesterday. what it felt like to wake up with that dread. I don't miss the house. That surprised me. I thought I'd ache for the walls, the floors, the old hinges and peeling paint. But I don't, because those things were never what made it home. Rose did. And she's with me still in the quilt at the foot of my bed, in the spoon I stir with, in the way I water the potted fern she would have fussed over. And in the quiet. Oh, the quiet. It doesn't ask for anything. It doesn't judge. It just offers space. And I fill it not with anger, but with breath. Sometimes I walk past the real estate office, and I see a photo of my old house in the window. Sold, the sticker says. But it's wrong. Because what they bought wasn't mine anymore. They sold the house. But they lost the man who built it.